What if I told you there was one line of connective tissue that massively affects how your lymphatic fluid drains, specifically affects how well you're able to diaphragmatic breathe? So if you're struggling with activating your diaphragm, you need to listen to this video because we're going to talk about how this one line can be the reason or the culprit. Now, hear me out. Not too many people talk about this, and I'm sure there'll be more people talking about it now, but in the general sense, there's a lot of people talking about fascia, and we are talking about a fascial line, specifically the deep frontal line. Now, again, why I'm choosing to talk about this one is because I feel like a lot of us struggle to activate our diaphragm, and what I have found is that most people have restriction within this fascial line that is making it harder. We'll talk about all the structures that this fascial line attaches to, but here's the craziest part. Our connective tissue, our fascia, is ultimately, I want you to think of it like a spider web, or I've used this before, a loofah. I like the visual. The loofah is like spider webby. And when our connective tissue, when our fascia is dehydrated, it means that the structures within it and around it and what it encompasses doesn't move as well, right? It's harder to move it. It's crunchy. It doesn't do as good of a job as when it's hydrated. When it's hydrated, it literally can bend and move and do all the things that it's supposed to. Now, the crazy part about fascial lines is the lines literally, for the most part, because we have 5 body lines, we have more arm lines, but we're focusing on the deep fascial today, is they run from ultimately like our head down to our toes. And we might be experiencing pain, discomfort, or dysfunction in one area, but that's not actually where the issue arises. That's why for many years, when I was working one-on-one in a clinic, legit from, starting in 2010, I would listen to my clients coming in and describing where the pain, the discomfort, the restriction was, but that wasn't usually where I started. I wasn't only focusing, let's say, on the shoulder or the hip or the knee or the low back. I was assessing where and how their body was moving in order to find out where the restriction actually was. So today's video, we're going to go through the deep frontal. And so, like I said before, if you're struggling with diaphragmatic breathing, this video is for you. Now, one thing that I think is really important to note is when our fascia is dehydrated, or it's not moving properly, or it becomes adhered, or it has adhesions in it, it really restricts blood flow, lymphatic drainage, nerve communication, muscle contraction and glide, stability, posture. It affects a whole bunch of things. So it's super important that when we look at fascia, we're looking at it from a whole body standpoint, not generally just like one area or another. Not to say that we don't have restrictions in one area versus the others, but it's really important to look at our body as one whole functioning unit. Okay, so the thing about the deep frontal line is this line is not huge on movement. This one isn't the one that's giving you all of the movement that our body does, but it is giving us a lot of stability, a lot of upright posture, a lot of diaphragmatic breathing. It helps you balance. It literally helps us do the things we have to so that the other fascial lines can do their job. So where does the deep fascial line attach to? Now I'm going to list off a whole bunch of locations and bones and structures so that you can get a good idea. Now, the point is not so that you memorize this, because that's not the point behind this. The point behind this is for you to get how wide and how much that this line is attached to us, especially how deep it goes. So it starts at our plantar fascia of the foot, then it goes to the posterior tibialis, flexor hallucis longus, tibia, abductor muscles, pelvic floor, psoas, iliacus, lumbar spine, diaphragm, mediastinal fascia, pericardium, so like the connective tissue surrounding the heart, deep cervical fascia, longus colli and longus capitis, hyoid musculature, your tongue, and your jaw. Whoa. So really what that means, like I'm gonna give it to you in like super basic terms that I talk to my nieces and nephews in. It's literally running from our feet up the inside of our legs. It hits our pelvis, and that's where it goes into the pelvic floor. Then it runs up along the body of our spine, in through the inside of our rib cage. Okay, so it covers the inside of our rib cage, comes up on the body of our spine and our cervical neck, comes up through our hyoid and our jaw and through our tongue. So this is why tongue posture, diaphragmatic breathing, and pelvic floor is so important. Now remember, our lymphatic fluid only drains, especially the lymphatic fluid from our belly button down to our toes, if our diaphragm is able to act as a pump, pulling up that fluid. If our fascia, if our deep frontal fascia line is restricted, it's not moving well, it's dehydrated, we're gonna have fluid accumulation from our belly button down to our toes. Potentially. This is why we're starting here. Not to say that this is the most important, but I find that this one has a lot of restrictions that most people don't ever address. So what would be some things that we might experience if this fascial line was giving us some issues? Well, one thing would be poor posture. Forward head posture, because if the fascia within the front of our neck is tight, it's going to pull things forward. So it'll give us forward head posture. It'll also contribute when our forward head comes forward, rounded shoulders. It massively, this is probably the biggest one that I see, is people have a hard time taking a deep breath, like truly taking a deep breath, allowing their diaphragm to drop down and their ribs expand 360 degrees. That is a telltale sign that there is some fascial restriction within this line that is preventing us from diaphragmatic breathing. We end up having a lot of neck tension, jaw tension, even clenching. We can end up having super tight, like hip flexors, pelvic floor dysfunction. So you might be doing like all the exercises for pelvic floor, especially if you've had a baby and now you're like, oh my gosh, I leak, I dribble, but the exercises aren't working. It might be because your deep frontal fascial line has restrictions. It's not moving properly, which is causing those muscles to fire inaccurately or maybe inappropriately. It can also result in poor balance, back pain, because remember, it runs all along the front of our spine. It can have just this general feeling of like stuckness because it's so deep. So when somebody comes to me with any of those symptoms, like I don't necessarily automatically go, oh, it's fascia, because there's lots of things that can contribute to those symptoms, but I definitely check the fascial lines to see, okay, what is going on with that person? Because guys, our fascia only moves if we move. And guess what? We are sedentary people now. We work long hours at desks, we sit in cars, we watch sporting events. We're sedentary. And so it is never surprising or shocking to me when there are fascial adhesions, especially fascial adhesions when somebody's doing lymphatic drainage and they're not seeing benefits. All right. Now, why am I putting a focus on this? You might be like, okay, you usually talk about lymph. What in the hell are you talking about this for? Well, if you don't remember, I did a general talk on fascia, and I like this loofah visual because it makes sense and it really does look like a spider web, like our fascia is. Now I squished this, but I want you to envision that our fascia kind of looks like this, and what it runs through the middle is going to be things like muscles, blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, nerves, all the things. So if we are struggling with blood flow or lymphatic drainage or even muscle gliding, muscle contraction, we have really tight, stiff muscles, I'm willing to bet that the fascia is playing a role in that, because the fascia is what's encompassing all of this. So if the fascia isn't able to do its job and move freely, right? Because if the fascia is moving, and remember the lymphatic system doesn't have a pump, it moves when we move, which means our fascia moves when we move. So if our fascia can move, then it's going to help move lymphatic fluid. If our fascia can't move properly, our lymphatic fluid is going to have a harder time moving. Not to say that it's not, but it's going to slow down. We're going to have more congestion. Now, one thing that I do like to say to make this really clear is that when tissue becomes stiff, and we're just talking tissue in general, movement automatically decreases, right? Because we just don't have the same range of motion. Breathing generally becomes shallower, and the natural mechanical forces that assist with the lymphatic drainage become less effective. That's ultimately how fascia affects lymphatic drainage. So what I want you to take note is, how long do you sit? How long are you driving? How long are you watching TV? How long are you sitting on your phone? Do you have a lot of guarding, a lot of stress? Are you a shallow breather? Are you a shallow chest breather? All of those things are going to contribute, especially that shallow chest breathing is going to contribute to fascial adhesions within this fascial line. Other things that can contribute would be like prior injuries, so sprains, falls, whiplash, surgeries, scars, even tattoos. I know that's not an injury, but it's a selective injury. But all of those things can contribute to fascial adhesions, which again, remember, linking it back, if you're struggling with diaphragmatic breathing or lymphatic drainage, I definitely would look into this. Now, Dehydration is another big one that massively affects our fascia. It is not enough to just drink enough tap water. I actually don't drink tap water because of all the stuff in it. I only drink filtered water, but making sure that our water has the appropriate minerals in it. I have done other videos on that, so make sure you go and listen to it, because making sure that our water has the magnesium, the potassium, the sodium in it so that our body can absorb it is going to be really important, because that is what our body needs in order to utilize it to keep our fascia hydrated along with movement. So make sure you go and check out, like, how dehydrated are you? Are you watching, your minerals? Are you moving your body? Now, what I find works really well for fascia is ultimately moving in different movements and doing it dynamically, meaning we're putting the fascial lines through both a contraction and an extension when we're doing it. We want to cause it to contract and we want to extend it. And the reason we want to do that is because we're ultimately putting movement within that line that's going to help that whole train to start moving appropriately. Now, when we can get our deep fascia to start moving, it really does help with rib expansion, which massively helps with diaphragmatic breathing. So one thing that I would recommend would be look at your hydration, look at how sedentary you are, and start to make some shifts with that. And then if you guys would like a series on, like a video on some deep frontal fascial movements that you guys can start to implement, let me know below and I'll do a video on that for you guys so that you can start to see, like, okay, what is it that we do? How do we do it? And if that is of interest, what I'll do is I will post it right after this video. It'll be the next video up if that is something that interests you guys. So again, fascia is really important. And I don't think looking at fascia individually as like just your shoulder or just your knee, looking at it from the whole standpoint of everything it attaches to, because again, we may have restriction in our knee, but we have pain in our hip. If we're just addressing our hip, we're never going to actually address where the dysfunction is. Same thing with like our diaphragm. If our chest isn't expanding and our rib cage isn't expanding, but it's because we have pelvic floor dysfunction, then we're never going to fully get to our ribs being able to expand to properly diaphragmatic breathing. So I hope that this was eye-opening in the sense that our fascia is super important. It is very widespread, but we can't just look at where we have discomfort or dysfunction. We got to look at the whole system, the whole line, to see where that dysfunction may be coming from. Thanks for being here. And if you are somebody that has had chronic pain or chronic dysfunction in one area, I'm going to implore you to look at that line that is attaching to that area that is being problematic and see where you may have restriction that's causing pain in that area. All right. Thanks for being here. And as always, happy draining.